Hello. Bear with us because we are here to talk about a very interesting topic. And my name is Marcella Ballard. I'm here with Maria Sinatra. This webinar is intended to give some pointers on how to prevent fraud and scam when new offerings are made of NFTs paid for by cryptocurrency. It's a very interesting topic, of course, and very timely. And fortunately, if any of you are IP lawyers, you have some good tools in your arsenal to try and combat fraud if and when it does occur. Maria, could you advance the slide? We're going to start with some of the basics and the nomenclature of what we're dealing with here, and then move into some practice pointers on how you can shore up some of the things within your business to when you're making an NFT offering that will help you in the event of fraud. Then we're going to move into some other sort of more detailed topics, closing out with some of the civil enforcement remedies that you may have, and also relevant law enforcement agencies that can help you if you are having a problem once you've launched an NFT. Here we go. Thank you. I'm coming to you from my kitchen. So this is probably a place where the scammers are also coming to you. So I feel, sort of in the same space. So move to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about NFTs, and of course, many of you already know what an NFT is. I am not a millennial, and I am not Gen Z even, and I had to think about, conceptually NFTs, because what I am is an IP litigator, an anti-counterfeiting lawyer who comes at and the enforcement perspective from being a former state prosecutor. And so when you prosecute against shady fraudsters, you have to keep abreast of all the new ways in which entities and people can scam you. So an NFT, which is a intangible asset, is a crypto asset residing on the blockchain. The blockchain is decentralized, and it's essentially a list of transactions that can be viewed and verified. And when you purchase an NFT, it's like you're getting a coupon, essentially, or a key code to access that digital asset. It can't be swapped like a dollar. Each NFT is unique, and you do not receive, when you purchase an NFT, you do not receive, like a hanging for your wall or a piece of art. What you are receiving is a digital asset that is hopefully unique. That is, if it's not being offered by people, bad guys. So moving next. I thought this was helpful. This slide will give you an idea of some of the popular NFTs now. These are not necessarily all the time Picassos or things that you would think have the value of a mainstream piece of art. Some of the more popular ones, for example, up in the right-hand corner, the CryptoPunks going for $1 million, or the Bored Ape and so on and so forth. There's as many variations of NFTs as you can imagine. And it's serious business. And marketing agencies and the business segment of any entity that owns IP is very interested in this because it is a new frontier, and it is allowing companies to take assets that they have already that might be stale or might have retro value or even new ones, and it's a new capability that a company has to monetize their IP, and so it is very important to make sure you know all the ins and outs before you launch your NFT offering. To the next one. So this slide we put together just to sort of give you an idea of the various touch points when an NFT is making an offering. So, for example, there are marketplaces such as OpenSea is one good example that everyone has probably heard of, where NFTs are sold and exchanged. But when NFTs are purchased, they are purchased frequently with cryptocurrency, which is another digital asset on the blockchain. So listed there are some of the various cryptocurrencies that are used. Now, when cryptocurrency is used to purchase an NFT, there is something known as a digital wallet. And the consumer keeps the cryptocurrency and oftentimes the NFTs in their digital wallet, and scammers have been able to wrongfully access digital wallets from time to time when the NFTs go to market. So it's important to be aware of each touch point in the offering as you are going to market, and try to lock down and know as much as you can about each of these before the NFT launches. Next one. Next one.
So I'll tell you a little bit about the next part of our presentation. I just want to echo Marcy's sentiments in the beginning of this. Thank you all for coming and for listening to us discuss this topic. Marcy already gave you the basics of NFTs and how they're bought, how they're sold. Part 2 of this presentation really talks about the tools that your business currently has that could help you protect your NFTs and when they launch, protect against fraud. So moving to the next slide, the first tool that we're going to talk about that your company likely already has, if it is established or has started even within the past few years, is IP. So whether those assets are trademarks, trade dress, or copyrights, most likely your company already has registered and unregistered IP that they use for marketing their products and services and their main products and services. So one of the tools that could benefit you before launching an NFT is knowing what your company already owns. The reason why we say that that's beneficial is because different IP assets may provide different means of protection or different redress and can provide different assistance in preventing fraud when launching your NFT. So one of the things that is helpful to be cognizant of when thinking about the IP assets that your company already owns that may or may not be used in the NFT launch is your company thinking about launching an NFT with new source identifiers? So a source identifier that your company hasn't used within its main business. And the reason why you should be cognizant about that is if you're using new IP, it may be harder to enforce or protect against theft. Some platforms, which we'll talk about later, and third parties, sometimes are not as keen into helping enforce unregistered marks. So if you're using new IP and new source identifiers, it's unlikely that those source identifiers, particularly trademarks, will be registered before the launch of an NFT if you're hoping to launch the NFT quickly. So one of the things that can benefit you in protecting that IP and your company's rights in the NFT launch is to pair any new source identifiers or trademarks with existing source identifiers in connection with the IP launch. This slide is similar. One of the things that may also benefit a company is thinking about URLs and social media handles that the company already owns. So what are your flagship domain names? What are your flagship Twitter, Instagram, Discord servers? And are you planning on using those in the launch? One of the things that we've been seeing is if your company isn't using the main company domain to launch the NFT, that's one of the touch points where fraudsters may try to take advantage. So typically companies have defensive domains surrounding their main company URL. So if your company was called Widgets and you had widgets.com, your company likely or may or may not have defensive registrations for widgets spelled slightly incorrectly.com or widgetsrus.com, something, and a slight extension of that core domain to prevent third parties or nefarious parties from registering a domain and then tricking people into believing that they're associated with you when they are not. If you plan on using a new domain for the NFT launch, it will be tremendously helpful to think about defensive domains that your company may want to also register in addition to that NFT domain. So for example, if your NFT domain is going to be widgets NFT, you may want to also register widgets NFTs, or again, widgets slightly spelled incorrectly or with an additional one character. You may want to register widgets NFT.app if your actual authentic website is widgetsnft.com, things like that. And the same goes for any social media handles that you may seek to use in connection with the NFT launch. We found that bad actors seek to mirror authentic domain names and authentic social media handles in schemes to try to take advantage of consumers. Marcy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would just add one point there. Whenever possible, it is helpful to lock down all of these things and harmonize them in advance of the launch. And by that, I mean the trademark, the trade dress, the copyright, the URLs, the social media handles, everything should be, let's say you're having new trademark NFT, but you should tie back to the legacy trademark that you have. And even putting on your legacy website and information about the new launch of the NFT and say, these are the addresses by which you will be contacted, or the client team will talk to you about this NFT offering, and then list the various URLs, social media handles, and websites in one place with an information about how a user a consumer can tell that these are authentic. And by that, I mean, For example, let's say you have newtrademark.com is your NFT offering. You should make sure that your legacy.com URL refers to that and says, for example, there are no extensions on the authentic NFT URL, because they will just add, the fraudsters will just add, for example, new trademark mint, new trademark app, new trademark, just say, this is it, there's no extensions, this is the offering, and if you have any questions, come back to, and then have a point of contact, which is in a later slide. But I'm just trying to sort of give some color into what you're talking about there. If the fraud people, the people trying to rip off consumers on new NFT offerings are coming up with new and creative ways, oftentimes they will just scrape your entire website and put it up on a new URL that looks somewhat similar but has some other letters thrown in there. And when a consumer is getting, when contact is made with that consumer, they don't necessarily always look at every single letter in the link that they're clicking on when they're traveling to the fraudster's website. So it's helpful to have sort of an information page, or this is how it's authentic page, to lay it all out, and a point of contact before you launch.
So speaking of points of contact that Marcy was referencing, so historically we found that designating a point of contact at the company to collect information, whether that be, you know, a few different people or one person, is hugely beneficial, particularly in this area, because if fraud happens, it tends to happen quickly. And, you know, the nature of these scams are constantly evolving and constantly changing. I know people sometimes compare counterfeiting to whack-a-mole, but it truly sometimes is whack-a-mole, where you'll shut down fraudsters in one area, and then they may pop up with a different scam or a slightly different way to confuse consumers. So Marcy will talk more about different enforcement options, but having a point of contact at the company is hugely helpful for enforcement options. So typically, sorry, go ahead, Marcy.
I was going to say, we have some bullets for some ideas of point of contact people. What I have found that it's more helpful to have somebody who's not a lawyer, who's on the business side and who's intimately familiar with the NFT launch, and all of the, you know, touch points surrounding it from a practical, mechanical standpoint, because that is much more important. Taking screenshots, fielding consumers who were being duped, having basically somebody from the company in there as a, you know, posing as a consumer to see what is received, is very helpful, so that when the fraud occurs, we, the lawyers, are able to take that, get the screenshots, get the evidence of it, and present it to the various third parties that are helping to launch the NFTs.
Yeah, so things that would be helpful to collect, and to collect as soon as it starts occurring, are screenshots showing your company's trademark or copyrighted material being used inappropriately, screenshots of the fraudsters maybe attempting to lead the consumers to a different link, an unauthorized website, any direct messages that they may send consumers over various social media platforms. Those would all be tremendously helpful to have someone on the ground, like Marcy said, gathering screenshots as it's occurring. Another thing to be helpful to gather in one central place would be consumer complaints. Often consumers, if they're dissatisfied or as the scam is occurring, or if they were just scammed out of their cryptocurrency or their NFTs, comment directly on social media, or will comment directly on blogs, or may send the company an email. All of those sources of complaints should ideally be collected and maintained for, like Marcy said, for outside counsel if it needs to escalate. Marcy had mentioned that she prefers that it's not an attorney be the sole point of contact. I agree. One of the reasons why, I'm guessing she's probably saying that, is because this touch point at the company that's collecting a lot of this would-be evidence may wind up having to be a declarant later on in the event that the company has to seek relief from a court or from an administrative agency or what have you. So this in-house point of contact should also be aware that there's a chance that they may have to later on be a declarant in connection with collecting this information and being the touch point for the data. And some of the benefits that we have here, there are many. It ensures that the data is being collected in one place, so it reduces the risk of omitting any facts, particularly with NFTs and with online scams. That's crucial. Like we said, it happens very quickly. So any time saved having to go back and forth with multiple people at the company is ideal. And then if outside counsel or even inside counsel has any questions, those questions could hopefully be resolved fairly quickly if the data is all in one place. So part 1 and 2 were about NFT basics and things that your company or business has internally that may help prevent fraud and help prevent IP theft and theft of cryptocurrency. Part 3 is more about identifying potential third parties that could be of assistance to your company in preventing fraud. And what we mean by third parties is what platforms are going to be implicated by your company's NFT offering. So like most companies, your NFT will probably be promoted through some form of social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Discord, Twitter. I'm starting to get a little old, so Snapchat, but I don't really use Snapchat. And TikTok, whatever else is out there that may be used to get the message out concerning your NFT offering. So that's what we mean by platforms being implicated. Another platform that may be implicated is the marketplace itself. So like Marcy had mentioned earlier, maybe OpenSea, if that's the platform that your company has decided to use. There are a number of companies that offer digital wallets, so they may come into play if your consumers may access those regularly. And then any blogs your company may use and things like that would help with the NFT launch. So
and I was just going to jump in here because let's be clear here. The people engaging in the fraud are hiding behind, they may be offshore, they're hiding behind privacy protection in the scam websites. They are perhaps in the Ukraine or somewhere else. So the assistance that the brand owner is going to receive is going to come through these other touch points. And so it's really important to select the NFT marketplace and the digital wallets and the cryptocurrency and be aware of all the terms and conditions for each and every one of those, again, in advance of the NFT offering, because when something bad happens, you're going to be reaching out immediately to whatever apparatus that NFT marketplace or that digital wallet. For example, the digital wallet has sort of, what we old people would think of as like a payment processor or a means by which money is exchanged and processed. And knowing the ins and outs of that and how that mechanically works is very important. And that goes back to having a business person or a marketing person or an NFT person at the brand owner be familiar and set up their own, for example, digital wallet and join the marketplace and travel within the social media platform and see how messages are received. Having all that information at hand and being nimble about it is quite helpful when problems arise.
So Marcy had just briefly mentioned terms and conditions with various third parties, whether that be the marketplace or social media. Within those terms and conditions are also some other privacy policies sometimes third parties have. There's usually an internal process that third parties have that is already in place that may assist you in combating fraud. So depending on what IP rights are implicated in your NFT offering or what IP rights are being infringed, you may be able to take advantage of existing DMCA policies that a third party may have, or some third parties have policies concerning removing material that infringes registered trademarks. While policies concerning removing registered trademarks are a little bit less defined usually as the DMCA policies, they still could be of assistance as it gives you a touch point or a starting point to contact the third party. If there are no DMCA policies or trademark removal policies already in place or forms that a company may fill out, I would be prepared to contact a general phone number, a general company email, or even just try to get a legal department contact for these third parties generally, if you don't have another means to contact them. Whether you do that in advance of the NFT launch, which I think you should, or after it would help outside counsel possibly even serve any documents on these third parties and hope for their cooperation. Or if you do it beforehand and you have an internal business person try to reach out and try to preemptively ask if there's any steps or safeguards that your company that is offering an NFT could use on the platform. So sometimes platforms have sort of back-end capabilities that typical users don't have control over, typical users aren't aware of. So a platform may be able to limit comments, which is beneficial in terms of stamping out fraud, as fraudsters may try to comment links to their fraudulent NFT websites to confuse consumers, or try to comment links to fraudulent other social media platforms or digital wallets. The platform may be able to freeze repeat violators, which if you see a pattern of the same person or people popping up, you may be able to go to the third party and say, hey, I've filed multiple trademark removal complaints against them and they're still popping up, and they may be able to do something on their end. The platforms may also be able to limit unsolicited direct messages to a certain extent. We've been seeing fraudsters try to direct message different users to confuse them into believing that they're the authentic company and they're the authentic party offering the NFTs. So that's another way that a third party can maybe assist in closing that avenue that scammers could potentially use.
So and let's be clear, the direct messaging on the platforms is one of the biggest problems. And that goes back to the comment earlier where the brand owner, the NFT launch entity, can inform consumers, you will not receive direct messages from us. And if you do receive any messages from us on, Acme platform, then it will look like this. It will come from this. It will only come from this. There will not be, additional words or, and, that's, it's not always going to be perfectly helpful, but with, for example, maybe a bot sending just massive amounts of direct messages, at least if you can educate the consumers that your company doesn't do that, your company is not going to have some direct messages come in this certain way, can maybe put a barrier up. It seems to me like that is the biggest problem. The biggest problem being that the fraudsters are reaching out directly on the platforms to the consumers who are being duped. And so anything you can do in advance to try and prevent that would be helpful.
So
I jumped the educate the customer market slide, sorry.
it's okay. Before we go, a little further into part 4, I was just going to read off the CLE code for everyone. So the CLE code for today's CLE is NFT 2022. So we'll pause here for a moment. If you have any questions at this point on any of the material that we covered so far, feel free to submit them, I think, via the Q&A function on the Zoom. And if we get any, we'll try to answer them on the material that we covered already. I'll repeat the code one more time in case anyone was taking a break. I'll try to also repeat it at the end. But the code for the CLE is NFT 2022. Okay, I don't see any questions popping up yet. If some pop up, maybe we'll take a second to try to answer it as we go on. But I'll continue on with part 4. So we've already covered NFT basics, what your company has, tools third parties may have. Part 4, sort of elaborating on what Marcy had briefly mentioned earlier, is what your company can do either prior to the NFT launch or during the NFT launch that could help stem fraud, or if fraud's already occurring, curb it somewhat or try to make consumers aware of it. So we had talked about the company's flagship website. That flagship website that, widgets.com, for example, is crucial in this education of the consumer. You want to put any link to the official NFT website on your authentic flagship website. You want to put any crucial information that the consumer needs in purchasing the NFT. You want to put a link to any social media handles, if any, that are separate from your company's flagship social media handles related to the NFT launch. And that way it's all in one place and a consumer knows that the information on the flagship website is likely to be authentic. Like Marcy had mentioned, you want to put maybe information about the basic steps in the company's NFT purchasing process. So if you're using OpenSea, you may want to put on your main company page, the offering is only going to be on OpenSea. It's not going to be on another platform. if you're using only a .com website or something like that, or no direct messages, that's information that you want to put and give to the consumers. I would put that information on the main company website and any official NFT website your company launches, or any official social media platforms. If possible, I would create a dedicated page to this if it's big enough for your company. Or, if it's social media, maybe create a story and have the story run long for a few days, or create a specific post. Anything to get the consumer thinking about the authentic channels and providing them the tools to, help them help you, and to help them help themselves, to not get ripped off by, anyone seeking to take advantage.
And we do keep harking back to what I'll call the legacy IP, or the legacy website. And the reason for that is because NFTs are so current and hot right now, that there's a real reluctance from marketing departments and so on and so forth to be tied to that old IP. And for example, like a social media handle or a domain name, as you could just go and purchase, today, and have it, but you're not going to get a trademark or a copyright that quickly. You'll get a copyright quicker than a trademark, but those trademarks that you have are going to be very, very important enforcement tools, as you will see in some of our later slides. And so if you can tie the new, exciting, fun NFT IP to the legacy IP wherever possible, you're going to have the enforcement tools that you need to go after when a fraud occurs.
Yeah, just touching on, the second part of this, if a fraud does start to occur, companies don't usually like to admit something bad or not ideal is occurring, but, at least make the consumers aware that something is out there, or that there may be people trying to, direct them to sites that are not authorized. It's better to maybe make consumers aware that something's out there than to have them complain or come back to you, after they, God forbid, get ripped off. But that may also be beneficial to, if a fraud or a scam is occurring, to sort of make a consumer aware that those scams and frauds are out there. Marcy, do you want to?
Oh, this is me now. Okay. So, I talk about legacy IP for a reason, because if you go to the next slide, in the event, let's say you have new NFT IP offering, and you have done all the right things. You have a website associated with it. You have information about the NFT, about what marketplace it's going to be offered on, what forms of cryptocurrency are being utilized to purchase it, what social media or platforms will be utilized to talk about it and exchange information about it. Assuming you have all that, and you have a fraud occurring, you have the Lanham Act. And why is the Lanham Act so useful to you if you decide to go into court and try to get an order to stop fraud when it occurs after an NFT has launched? And the way fraud occurs is manyfold, but at bottom, it's no different than when people are offering fake goods on sites that we're aware of, like eBay or something like that. There's an NFT. It's being offered. It's being purchased with cryptocurrency, and it is going into a consumer's digital wallet, and they have essentially that coupon for their asset. If the fraud, if a criminal gets there first and reaches out to a consumer and says, I have the NFT for you, and the consumer clicks on a link, travels to the fraud's website and offering, and then allows the fraud person, after they've clicked that link, to attach to their digital wallet, you may not be able to get a hold of that fraudster. So the Lanham Act has, as you probably all know, very powerful ex parte tools when you have a registered trademark that is being used in a scam. And remember that even if this is a new thing, and even if these are new intangible assets, and cryptocurrency is all the rage, they still are posing as the brand owner in some way, shape, or form. And that's why it's important to utilize your legacy IP in the NFT offering, so that when they do pose as the brand owner, you can go in ex parte under the Lanham Act, under sections 1114 and 1116, and seek immediate ex parte TRO relief. And that relief comes in the form of a very powerful TRO order that you can then serve on various entities in the sort of universe of NFT offerings, those entities being the registrars of the fake website, the platform on which the NFT is offering, the digital wallet payment processor, the social media platforms, and so on and so forth. Because again, you might not ever know exactly who it is in the Ukraine that is perpetrating this fraud, but that person, maybe it's not the Ukraine, but I don't know why I keep saying that, in the Eastern Bloc or something, you may never bring that person in front of a US court, but you have the Lanham Act and the ability to get an order to serve on all of these other third parties that can help you enforce against the fraud that's happening. And you can do so very quickly, and you can do so without any notice. That's the important part. And then, of course, once you figure out the various websites that they're using, you can go after the fraudulent websites through ICANN, or just by serving any order that you get under the Lanham Act or the Copyright Act on the registrar to get the website shut down very quickly.
I agree with everything Marcy said. If you want to move fast and funding is not as much of an option, the Lanham Act is great. A slightly slower and perhaps more cost-efficient option is ICANN, the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Program. That can be a way in which you can recoup those infringing fraudulent domains without actually going into federal court. Again, it will take much longer to get resolved. So if the fraud is occurring and happening widespread, like Marcy said, the seizure provisions are probably your best bet here.
So the next slide segment, and I actually see we have a question that's kind of a little bit related to the next section. So one of the question is there a legal requirement or an obligation to notify consumers about scams that are ongoing? And my answer to that would be, if the question is meant are there legal obligations to the brand owner to notify? I would think that the brand owner, by providing all the information that we had talked about earlier, would be satisfying those obligations. Each third party, however, may have a different legal requirement or a different legal obligation to take action when or if fraud is occurring. So when they receive notice of it. So, for example, a social media platform that has an authentic channel for discussing the NFTs, if there's a fraud happening on that channel, and they are direct messaging consumers and posing as the brand owner, then once that is raised with the third party via an order or otherwise, yes, they will try to comply with the order. And that's why it's important to be able to go in ex parte and get an order under the Lanham Act, so that you can work with the other platforms to try and notify consumers about what's going on, so that this doesn't happen anymore. I hope I answered the question. I can follow up after further on this next section. There are just some entities here in the United States that are interested, particularly when this type of digital theft is occurring. And there are, in local areas, laws, for example, and task force that have to do with electronic crime and digital scams. There is a section in the FBI that has an intellectual property rights crimes unit that you can reach out to, and there are field offices. Now, that is going to be, the FBI is only going to be interested in things that reach, a certain threshold, but certainly gathering all the information and putting a package together and getting information in front of somebody is going to be helpful, because this back when we were talking about gathering screenshots and the mechanics of how the fraud is happening, that's going to be important if you're making a presentation to these law enforcement agencies. And then there's, of course, an internet crime complaint center at the government. These entities are bombarded with scams and thefts and fraud all the time. So anything you can do to package up and explain what exactly is happening and where, and what you've done already to try and combat it for these agencies is very helpful. And the evidence that we've been gathering along the way with your point of contact at the company, with the screenshots and collecting consumer complaints, and oftentimes when NFT offerings are made, the price will fluctuate, or there will be a limited number available, for example, and there will be a monetary value assigned to each NFT. So if X number of consumers are defrauded, you can rack that up and at the price point at which they have purchased the NFT, and add it up and try to reach sort of a threshold of interest level, if you will, to these governmental agencies. 500 consumers were confused and purchased at $10,000 each, and so on and so forth. Do the math to just sort of raise it, the attention level. Because I think there's a lot of chatter and noise, and you've got to break through and try to pin down the monetary significance of the fraud to the agencies when you're reporting it.
Just to build slightly off of what Marcy said, with the last bullet point, the assign a monetary value, we're not really talking about the monetary value of the loss of goodwill in the IP assets with that bullet. So that's a much greater and more difficult calculus, and then sometimes it's incalculable. You can't pin down exactly what that monetary loss or the loss in goodwill would be. What we're talking about was what Marcy was mentioning, the amount that consumers paid to these fraudulent schemes. So if they come to Playboy, a client or whatever, and mention, we lost such and such amount of money, or, widgets, such and such amount of things, those add those up.
And you can tally it up and get to a sort of a significant looking threshold number pretty readily. And finally, I will say this is I don't even know if we're finally at the end here, but oh, there's my picture. Okay, so but I will say what is most interesting from a perspective of being an IP lawyer that essentially has made anti-counterfeiting sort of a cornerstone of my practice is that what we're finding is that the very platforms and the very marketplaces that are dealing and trading in these NFTs, they themselves have not necessarily always developed sophisticated mechanisms to deal with the fraud that is occurring. And so instead of being, for example, a typically combative litigator type, it often helps to try and work with the platform and describe to the platform and provide as many instances and information to them as possible to allow them to on their end to follow up and try to figure out how their processes and their mechanisms can be better streamlined or tooled to prevent this from these types of frauds from happening. I
think we have one other question that may have come in. The question is, how often does a consumer recoup their monetary value of loss through fraudulent activities?
So that's a good question. And the answer is we don't know. And the reason we don't know that is because this is literally brand new. And what we're talking about is trying to go in for emergency relief to stop something from happening from a injunction standpoint. And it's not necessarily, we haven't had time at this point to go all the way through a case and try to recoup money for a consumer. A consumer will probably have to reach out, the consumer themselves probably have to reach out to the various platforms as well and try to shore up, for example, how the settings, for example, on their digital wallet, or the ability for direct messages to reach them, and try to weed out spam and things of that nature. It is very much let the buyer beware at this point, and that's it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, also recoupment, a consumer recouping your monetary loss may be better understood by law enforcement, because they may have a better handle on the recoupment of the consumer funds.
And we are at the top of the hour. It's been very nice to see everybody that, well, we didn't see everybody, but it's nice to have a large number of people join today. And if there's any questions, we have our emails there. We'd be happy to answer anything in more detail or more specifics after this webinar via email.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. I'll repeat the CLE code just one last time for anyone who didn't catch it. The CLE code is NFT 2022.
Thank you very much.